Hey, this is Chris Franco, and you are listening to Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. CMQ investors, welcome to this show. It's great to have you here. When is the right time to sell a stock in your portfolio? Earlier this year, I uncovered what some of the greatest investing minds of all time said in response to that very question, and I shared those details in episode number 7. Now, based on my research, the best time to sell a stock in your portfolio is never. Ideally, you never sell. If you're able to do this, and I'll explain how to do this in a few minutes, but if you're able to do this, you have a huge advantage. Huge.
Big money.
I want to illustrate why the best time to sell is never. And to do that, I'm going to read a few excerpts from a 1996 Forbes cover story on none other than Charlie Munger. Conventional wisdom says that no one ever went broke taking profits. Charlie Munger doesn't think that way. Quote, "There are huge advantages for an individual to get into a position where you make a few great investments and just sit back. You're paying less to brokers, you're listening to less nonsense. Best of all," Munger says, "you don't have to pay out the tax collector every year. If it works, the governmental tax system gives you an extra 1, 2, or 3 percentage points per annum with compound effects." Munger's referring to what most investors know in theory, but ignore in practice, that the so-called capital gains tax is no capital gains tax at all. It is a transaction tax. No transaction, no tax. Since profit-taking involves transactions, it obliges you to take the IRS in as a partner. With profits not taken, there remains a theoretical tax liability, but the money is still working for you. Robert Hagstrom explained this concept in his book, The Warren Buffett Portfolio, which came out about 3 years after this Forbes cover story. Hagstrom writes, and I quote, "The unrealized capital gain in your portfolio is yours to keep as long as you own the stock. By holding on to the gain, assuming the investment tenets behind owning the company have not changed, you are able to compound your net worth more forcefully." So how do you do this? Before I tell you how I do this, let me share with you what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett did and how they applied this approach super successfully, dating back to 1972 when they first purchased See's Candy. As the Forbes cover story notes, and I quote, "Munger persuaded Buffett to buy 100% of See's Candy for Berkshire in 1972. It turned out to be a compound interest machine with a total pre-tax return of over 23% annually. And by the way, that's over a 24-year period. At any time in these 24 years, Berkshire Hathaway could have cashed in all or part of See's through an initial public offering. Why didn't it?" Answers Munger. "The number of acquisitions making 23% pre-tax is very small in America." The paragraph that I'm reading from concludes with the following sentence: "Better to leave the money compounding and a relatively sure thing." See's Candy was a business that Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett bought all of. But in their stock portfolio, meaning the Berkshire Hathaway securities portfolio, there are a number of publicly traded companies where they've applied the same approach. And the best example I can think of is Coca-Cola. Berkshire Hathaway began purchasing shares of Coca-Cola in 1988. And today, in 2021, Coca-Cola is Berkshire Hathaway's longest held stock. They have not sold a single share. Coca-Cola is a compound interest machine. Unless you can identify businesses that have characteristics of compounding machines, then it's really not wise to load up a portfolio of individual stocks, because in all likelihood, you're falling for the same traps that most individual investors fall for. Every single study points out that the average investor is terrible at picking stocks, but thinks they're better than average. Now, I've gone this route and done well in certain stocks, but the smartest thing I've ever done as an investor was buying low-cost index funds, and not a lot of them, by the way. We're talking the VU, VTSAX, VTI. Of course, don't just follow my lead, but I want to be transparent with you about where I've been putting my money over the years. Had I put all of my money there, I may not have seen some of the returns that I saw with some of my individual picks, but those picks didn't benefit from the long-lasting or long-term effects of compounding because I interrupted the process. I sold and I took my profits. When you can find something that you don't need to sell, you put yourself in a position, or kind of you put your surfboard in front of this giant wave that will build up, that is compound interest. And if you have a long ride ahead of you, just to go along with this metaphor here, well, it's not going to work out poorly. The future is uncertain, but as far as what is the most sensible approach to build meaningful wealth, no matter where you're starting from, so long as you have a long time horizon and you do sensible things, there's very little arguing with the fact that this is the way to go about doing it. The problem is activity interrupts the compounding process. I would say that activity is the enemy of compounding returns. Yet everywhere you look, you're encouraged to be very active. You need to buy this sector ETF, or you need to readjust your portfolio for inflation, or you should follow this guy on Instagram or TikTok and buy the stocks that he's recommending. The chorus is screaming, do stuff, be active, buy, sell, buy, sell. My checklist that I use before I buy any new investment includes the following question: how confident am I that I will not need to sell or feel compelled to sell this investment for at least 30 years? There are huge mathematical advantages to doing nothing. And I believe that's actually a Charlie Munger quote. And another Charlie Munger quote that I want to make sure I share with you: the best thing a human being can do is help another human being know more. If you've been enjoying the podcast, if you've listened to this episode, other episodes, and you found value in it, let someone else know about it. Send them a text message, tell them about it at work, approach them on the street and say, hey, you,
Me?
pull this up right now and subscribe.
I don't even have a phone.
So please let someone else know, and know that I appreciate you letting someone else know. Now, with all that said, my name is Chris Franco. This is Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, you mean to tell me that I can hear somebody's voice and they're not even in the same room as me? They might not even be in the same city as me? What the stupid dude?